The parents of Kendrick Johnson have announced plans to file documentation in federal court in Atlanta. Johnson was 17 years old when his body was discovered in a rolled-up gym mat at Lowndes High School. That happened back in 2013. WLB News 10's Mackenzie Petrie joins us live in the studio now with this update.
On September 19th, the Johnsons will be submitting a document that lists a number of grievances they have with the investigation, which was closed by Lowndes County Sheriff Ashley Paulk in January of last year. Last year, WALB sat down with Sheriff Paulk, and he explained why he feels 100% confident that there was no foul play in the case.
First autopsy was G.B.R, and it said positional asphyxiation accident. Approximately 2 years later, he was exhumed, and it was a paid-for autopsy by Dr. Anderson, and there's a fourth autopsy done by the Department of Defense that came back identical to what the G.B.R said initially. First autopsy was G.B.R, and it said positional asphyxiation accident. Approximately 2 years later, he was exhumed, and it was a paid-for autopsy by Dr. Anderson, and there's a fourth autopsy done by the Department of Defense. First autopsy was G.B.R, and it said positional asphyxiation accident. Approximately 2 years later, he was exhumed, and it was a paid-for autopsy by Dr. Anderson, and there's a fourth autopsy done by the Department of Defense. And there's a fourth autopsy done by the Department of Defense. Fourth autopsy done by the Department of Defense.
If I had 100 sheep and one of them got away, I would leave the 99 and go find that one. That's right. Look from the locks and jaws of Satan, I come creating, penetrating with force from the land of the lost and coming. Like Muhammad got the devil on the run, rising like the sun. Keep your eyes on the one on the base. Let it bring forth a reborn nation, up against the norm, creating a new formation. This foundation that I be standing on is firm. Look, y'all, we must learn. Oh, as a people, we gon' burn in the fire. Let's join hands with the Messiah. The land be Elijah. For real, I ain't no liar.
One thing we kept hearing over and over again was about this missing FBI report regarding the security tape hard drive and the blacked out footage. So we looked into finding that report to see if we could locate it, and we did. However, the report was heavily redacted. But then we were able to find the unredacted FBI report, and what we discovered blew us away. You see, in the redacted report, you can barely see any of the video frames. Most of the frames are blacked out, and the ones with KJ are barely recognizable. In the unredacted report, we were able to see all the video frames in full color. The report follows KJ, Brian, and Brandon's movement throughout the school for the entire day and records where they were. Not only is this further video evidence that the Bell Boys were on campus when KJ went missing, we found something that the FBI clearly didn't want us to see. Let us put them side by side so you can see what we found. Here they are. Can you see something a little odd? Look closely. There appears to be a frame on both pages that matches. How could this be? What tipped us off is KJ's yellow folder. We were going through Brian's movements, and all of a sudden, KJ's folder appeared on screen. That's right. There's a frame on KJ's side and Brian's side that is identical. The boys are standing seemingly right next to each other in the hallway.
Did you see Kendrick that day?
No. I did not.
Seeing the alleged killer of KJ standing next to him in the hallway the day he died in school has sent chills down our spines. take 6 years and an independent filmmaker to find this? These are all questions that may never go answered. But what we do know for sure is that we have more facts now than we ever have. And this case needs to be reopened and re-examined with a fine-tooth comb.
The parents of Kendrick Johnson have announced plans to file documentation in federal court in Atlanta. Johnson was 17 years old when his body was discovered in a rolled-up gym mat at Lowndes High School. That happened back in 2013. WLB News 10's Mackenzie Petrie joins us live in the studio now with this update.
On September 19th, the Johnsons will be submitting a document that lists a number of grievances they have with the investigation, which was closed by Lowndes County Sheriff Ashley Polk in January of last year. Kendrick Johnson's parents plan to address what they say is false information about the death of their son. Lowndes County Sheriff Ashley Polk closed the case last year, nearly 10 years after Kendrick Johnson's death. He ruled the death an accident, saying Kendrick died of positional asphyxiation when he fell into a vertical gym mat while reaching for something. Last year, WALB sat down with Sheriff Polk, and he explained why he feels 100% confident that there was no foul play in the case.
First autopsy was G.B.R, and it said positional asphyxiation accident. Approximately 2 years later, he was exhumed, and it was a paid-for autopsy by Dr. Anderson, and there's a fourth autopsy done by the Department of Defense that came back identical to what the G.B.R said initially. So if somebody comes back and says, hey, you're wrong, I'm wrong. Prove it to me.
The Johnsons have never believed that. They believe Kendrick Johnson was murdered and placed in the gym mat. They've lost several court battles along the way. A family spokesperson sent us a statement that reads in part, quote, "For 10 years, the Johnsons have endured having their constitutional rights violated and interfered with by government employees in the state of Georgia, poisoning the well with the farce, the scientifically and physically impossible narrative that Kendrick Johnson died from a freak accident," end quote. The Johnsons say they will take this fight all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary. Reporting live in studio, Mackenzie Petrie, WALB, your hometown news source.
Sheriff Polk, if you will, walk me through this process, through the process of this investigation, and talk about the resources that went into this investigation.
Of course, you know, when Kendrick was found, I was not a sheriff. There was another sheriff here. And, but, you know, I came back after roughly 8 years after, this incident happened. And it was still on the minds of a lot of people in this county. I'm born and raised here, and I know a lot of people. We might have 130,000, 40,000 people. I know a lot of them. And it was an issue. It was an issue during the election, actually, when you look at this case. And, of course, the case was, when it happened out there, it wound up with a lot of agencies involved. You got the FBI, the G.B.R, the Department of Justice, the Lowndes County Crime Lab, of course, the Sheriff's Office. At that time, they were the lead investigators to start with. And, you wind up with actually probably hundreds of people involved looking at this. It was extensively looked at by the FBI and the Department of Justice. I would just looking at the amount of effort and files and plane trips and people brought in, and over 58 people, I think 58 people went before the grand jury. They were questioned, and probably $3 or $4 million spent by the federal government on it. And I forget exactly what their conclusion was, but they didn't conclude it was a homicide. They just kind of, I believe they used the word unfounded, or I forget exactly how they did it. But when I came back, I knew those files were out there with all this information that nobody had ever seen in our agency. And I told people I'd do my best to look into it personally. I mean, I've been in this over 20 years, and I hope that a lot of people around here, people that know me, trust me. Because I live by my word. I'll die before I tell a lie. And so we started off in April of 2019, April the 12th. I remember that date, and we'll never forget it. And Mr. Johnson actually sat in this building in another office, and we composed a letter to the U.S. Attorney's Office requesting those files. They referred us to an agency in Washington which came back and said they would not release them because it was under the Privacy Act, even though it was the family asking for it. I mean, it was the Sheriff's Office and the Johnsons. Mr. Johnson, the letter contains the family's his name and mine. And we, as a group, are asking for this. And I tried to pursue it at different avenues, and the Johnsons pursued it in different avenues, and a gentleman named Marcus Coleman from Atlanta, who I believe had some connections with DOJ. He also pursued it, and I think he was a lot of the reason we obtained him. I believe he had some people he knew.
He was able to call on.
Yeah, I got a call in December of 2020, right before Christmas. I called it a Christmas present. A young lady was an assistant U.S. attorney at a North District of Ohio, where the case had been filed and moved to. She notified me that if I would reopen the case, I would get the files, and I said, case is reopened. I told her right then. And they started coming in. I mean, it's 17, 18 boxes. Most of it is printed material, thousands of pages. And even just some of the phone records are 4,000 pages by themselves.
Wow.
And so when we got all the material here in January of last year, 21, I divided the boxes up. I took 2 people that were here when this happened, that worked on the case, familiar with the case. One of them being Captain Stride Jones, and then Lieutenant Jack Winningham. And we took separate boxes. I took box number 1, just saying they had 1, and one of them had 2, one of them had 3. We went through those files independent of each other, taking notes. And then we would go to another box. And so when it was all over, three different people had been through the whole collection of files with 3 different write-ups to see how our opinions match to certain things and like that. And we interviewed some of the people involved in the investigations. An FBI agent that's retired that I knew, and had some people clarify and make sure we understood what they had said. We didn't interview a whole lot of people because there was so much evidence there and questioning. The questions that we would have asked them had already been asked, and they were.
It was already in that information.
Yeah, and they wasn't oath given those questions, so it wouldn't have made a whole lot of sense to call somebody up and ask them the same set of questions. Not under oath either, because a lot of this is grand jury material. Definitely can't be released under Georgia law, federal law, and right now the whole set of files is under a gag order by Judge Lawson, and I can't let you open those boxes and look in them. And but I hope part of that might be lifted later, because I'm a transparent person. You could sit right in my office all night and look at it. If they would let me, you could look in every box in there as far as I'm concerned.
So that process of the 3 of you going through these files took, I guess, almost a year?
Took over a year.
Over a year.
A year. My shorthand notes was 45 pages long. And then I took we made sure there weren't any conflicts between what they thought about something and what I thought about it, the way I saw it. We sat down for hours and went over everything piece by piece. And then I created this synopsis here, which is a very short version. But I knew I feel like I addressed a lot of rumors in this case.
Well, I was going to ask you, why do you think so many people, social media.
Social media, so many people, I saw it on social media, and it's got to be the truth.
Well, there are still people in the community, and some may have been influenced by social media and other conversations within the community. But across the nation, and actually this made international news. So there's still doubt. there is still doubt.
There will always be doubt when you have something like this. I mean, I've had other cases I've worked over the years. I mean, you can still find people think the world's flat. I mean, you can be truthful. I mean, that's, go out and find enough people, you can find that. I mean, never are you going to get 100% of the people to agree with anything you do in law enforcement. Or any verdict you come out, I mean, that's why you have 12 people on a jury.
Well, I think the most important people in all of this, in terms of coming to a conclusion, would be the Johnson family. Now, you know them. You've known them over the years. I
know their extended family, and I mean, it's a tragedy. It's a tragic thing what happened to son. You never want to outlive your children. I mean, I saw that with my mother and father. You know, we lost a sister, and you know, it was to cancer, but they still lost a child. And you never get over losing a child. You mothered that child, you raised that child. And I hated Miss Johnson, Jackie Johnson. I mean, it's something that'll never go away, and there'll always be, no matter how much evidence on any case, there's always going to be a little bit of doubt what happened to my son. And I realize that. But all I do is the best I can do from the evidence I've got. And that's what I put out here, and that's what the evidence showed. And people ask me why I put up $500,000 of my own money. It wasn't because I had doubt in what I'd said about the synopsis. It's just that I wanted to add something else to it to try and prove myself wrong.
Well, you got to one of my questions, because are you prepared?
If I have to write a check, it means I was wrong.
To write that check?
I'm prepared.
And we were talking previously about sometimes cases are not solved within, you know, a set amount of time. Maybe it's going to be years and years and years. But are you also hopeful that somebody will walk through that door and tell you that, hey, I know something about this case and it's legitimate, and that would be the incentive, that reward?
If it cost me $500,000, it wouldn't bother me one bit. I've been blessed in my life. People ask me, was that my savings, was that my salary? No. I've been very blessed in things that the company I started. And I didn't tell my wife I was doing it. She had to find out with me.
Well, I was curious about what her response was. Did you have that? You didn't have that discussion.
I've been 55 years. She knows exactly how I feel about things like this, and I am that convicted that if it takes that to get somebody to tell me something that I don't know or I didn't see in those files, it's worth it. It's worth it to me.
Talk about trust. You know, it's been headline after headline about law enforcement and the distrust from communities of color across the nation. What is the situation here with this case in Valdosta and Lowndes County in terms of law enforcement and trust in what you have concluded?
Well, people know me from business. They know me. I'm involved with a bank here. They know I live by my word. And they know my children. They know how they were raised to live by their word. And I look people in the eye. My father used to beat me on the head and said, you better look somebody in the eye when you're talking to them. You better tell the truth. You can walk up to any employee down here, they don't know who you were, 250 employees down at the sheriff's office. Say, what is the quickest way to get fired down here? And they'll tell you, tell a lie. I don't tolerate it. You can throw a bowl of water on me and you won't make me as mad if you told me a lie. And I live by my word, and I've always done that. And I've never shirked the press. I've never shirked the bad answers. We've made mistakes, and I'll call TV up, say, hey, we messed up. And I'll stand by that. But I have so much confidence in my relationship with the community, any part of the community, African American or whatever else. I've never worn a gun. I don't wear a gun anywhere. I'll go anywhere in this county, anytime, day or night. I've gotten out on murder scenes in the city. I've gotten out on riots in the city where things going on. I don't wear a gun because I tell new sheriffs, and I've been doing this is my 6th term, you can run a sheriff's office on 2 phrases, 3 words: common sense and compassion.
What about the relationship with the Johnson family right now? And then let me back up. Before you released your conclusion, did you talk with the family? Did you share the information? How did they receive the information?
When I came back, you know, 5 years ago, I started talking with the Johnson family. Way before that, when they were waiting on the autopsy, I made a phone call in their presence to rush that autopsy up on this, and I wasn't sheriff then. I wasn't even in the sheriff's office. But I knew them. I walked out and saw them standing in a group, and they were very distraught that the autopsy hadn't gotten back. They heard me make the phone call. That was my compassionate side of me. And I said, can I help you? And I did, because I knew Bernie Keenan very well, the head of the G.B.R. And I worked with the Johnsons ever since. But over time, they for some reason, they feel like that I'm not doing my job. They feel like there's cover-ups and everything else, and that's their prerogative. That comes my job to get. And I've been called names. I've been called a liar by them when I released this. And you know, we're working another case for them that involves, and it's another case I can't talk about and tell you what's going on with it. I worked hand in hand with them. I've worked with the lawyers, but we got to a point in that case where we had some questions that we wanted her to answer, and being compassionate again, I said, let me send these to you in writing, so sitting you down in an interview room. I mean, because everything's very disturbing to her, and I understand she's a mother lost a child. And we sent them in writing. You just otherwise have your lawyer mail them back. They quit corresponding with us. And so when this came out, I knew they knew that we'd been working on it. I mean, I'd actually had some journalists coming in and said that they were unhappy it was taking me so long. But this was not something I was going to rush. It took me 10 years. It was going to take 10 years. Because when I put it out, my name's on it, it's going to be, you better believe I'm going to know that it's fact and not any fiction. So that you know, them calling me names, that doesn't bother me. I've been called names all my life, you know.
But the liar.
That liar, don't call me a liar. You can call me a lot of names. You call me a cracker. You can call me whatever you want to. You can call me any name in the book. A lot of them you can't put on TV. But don't call me a liar.
I want to know when you, after you, maybe it was as you were going through these files, is there one document or one piece of evidence, or maybe it was an accumulation of documents that jumped out at you that led to your conclusion?
One of the things that really made me really get concerned, I got to a point where 4 FBI agents sat down with the U.S. attorney and told him they were closing their case because they could not find anything criminal. And the U.S. attorney replied, I'm not saying this is verbatim, but essentially this is going to make me famous. I'm going to continue the case. That's when I said it became a witch hunt. They started trying to fabricate. They tried to try and intimidate people, even bribe people. And it's all in those files. They used tactics of investigative material that I would have fired or prosecuted one of my people for.
And you said this was the U.S. Attorney's Office.
That's correct. And of course they brought in 2 detectives from the Washington, D.C. police that were working under the U.S. Attorney. And you'll find where in those files later on where there's correspondence that she was told that she would also be famous. So it was, you know, the type, the coercion, it's in my write-up, you know, the coercion and everything else. It was unbelievable.
I want to go to...
There were 58 people taken before the grand jury.
And they all testified under oath.
And a lot of these were children.
Well, I want to, this next question sort of goes to that it was a high school and there were children or students there. You know, one of the questions, even when I saw the pictures of Kendrick, his feet in socks, first of all, how did the rolled up gym mat get on its side?
When he was discovered, the coach went away and brought it down because they didn't know if he was deceased at the time or just still breathing. I mean, you couldn't see. So when the children came up in the stands, there was a set of bleachers. They came to class and they were told to go get in the bleachers. They came up and got in the bleachers and the mats over here, and some of the people looked over the left and saw some socks sticking up. Then they realized it was a person. They called the coach, and the coach came over there and they brought the mat down in a horizontal position and got the torso probably halfway out because they didn't know if he was deceased or not. I mean, you could see the feet, and you certainly couldn't tell if that person's deceased because you see their feet. They weren't moving, and I mean, you couldn't positive until you could check for a pulse somewhere. So that's what they did. Of course, Leviticus had said on the body, you know, it'd been there 19 hours approximately when documents proved. So when they saw the face, you could obviously tell he was deceased.
How, from what has been explained to me, that students would hide their expensive, tennis shoes, athletic shoes in the mats or near the mats?
They would drop them down to the core of the mat. The mats are rolled up with a strap around them, so it leaves about a 14 to 16-inch hole, depending on what type of mat it is, down the middle, hollow. Just like a roll of aluminum foil, you know, aluminum foil's around a tube. So you got a tube down the middle. And the lockers in the gym, that was the old gym, not the new gym, all torn up. And so the kids being kids, they devised it was a good place to hide their shoes while they were, you know, in gym or whatever else, changing shoes. And what they would do, they would drop them down the mat. Mats are 72 inches tall, 6 feet, average height, you know, most males. And they would just grab the mat. They're heavy, but they would just tilt them somewhat where the bottom would come up in an angle. Somebody else would pull the shoes out. They'd lay on the floor, of course. So they disposed them. So if the mat's like this, you tilt it and you reach in, grab the shoes. Well, what happened is this is the theory. Okay, and some of the pictures show it too, and there's testimony from quite a few people that the children did do this. I mean, even the students testified they stored the shoes in there. And in fact, I think one coach testified that he'd seen them do it. But they always put them in an exterior mat so you could just tilt it. But over the holidays, there were more mats brought in, and the mat that had his shoes in it, instead of being on the outside edge, where you could tilt it like, you know, just tilt it easily, it became an interior mat. They put another layer or two of mats outside that mat. So to get to access his shoes, he would have had to physically move 5 or 6 mats to be able to tilt the mat the shoes were in. And so it's theorized that he got up on top and tried to reach down into the, you know, extend your arm like this. You're going straight down, and you got trapped in the mat. I mean, you 6-foot man, you can reach 6 feet, you know, if you get your torso contorted right. So it was feasible that he could have reached that shoe, but he didn't realize that that mat would kind of just tighten up, and the more you moved, the further down you went. And then there was all these other mats were around it, so he couldn't tilt it over, even with his body weight. There's drawings in this document that show, you know, how it was to make people understand. If it had been an outside mat and he did that, he could have turned it over with his just by movement, you know, probably could have turned it over and it had gone horizontal. And he wouldn't have been in a position where you would suffocate, because positional asphyxiation is what it was. If you take some person there inverted any amount of time, the body fluids are going to go to the head and you're going to lose consciousness and you're going to die.
In terms of people, the community, people who've been following this story, I believe it was CNN that brought up the missing hours of videotape. Now, I do understand that one of the cameras was a motion detector type camera, and so it missed some of the activity in terms of Kendrick walking into the gym, because, you know, that famous video that we see of him walking down the hall, and that's the end of it. But there have been questions about missing video. Can you speak to that?
There were 62 cameras in the facility at that time, and they were what are called pixel, P-I-X-E-L cameras. They don't take a motion picture, they take a frame. They take a frame. Most of them are motion activated. So unless something's moving, they don't take a picture. And there's no missing footage. The FBI went through every camera in there, all 62 of them. They tracked 4 people, 2 of them being the Bells, 1 of them being Kendrick, and 1 of them being another young man that they thought was involved in the situation. They tracked those 4 people all day in that school on all the different cameras. They drew a map of where they went. There's maps in there where they went down the hall, when they went to class, which route they went. Those 4 subjects, looking at the FBI documents, never crossed paths that day. Never were in the same part of the building with each other. And as far as the camera, that they said the angle was changed. Some people said that it would have shown the exact corner where Kendrick was. It was changed 13 months before. A basketball hit it. We can show you the date. If I access those files, I can tell you the date, the time. I write down to the second that the basketball hit that camera and moved it, and nobody ever moved it back to where it originally was. But there's no missing footage. There's a difference in the servers on the times, because there were like 3 different servers that served these 62 cameras. One server did not do all 62. The times were not coordinated with them, but when the FBI did the work, just say the one server showed 10 o'clock, one showed 10:05. They coordinated it, the films themselves. They went back to make sure that you were looking at the same time on every server, which although it might say 10:05 on this one, it was actually looking at the 10 o'clock one over here. They coordinated all that, did a tremendous amount of extensive work. And there's, according to the FBI, there's no missing footage, and they coordinated all of it. And those 4 people never were in the vicinity of each other the day that Kendrick went missing.
Has the Johnson family had access to all of that information in terms of the video and I guess the conclusion from the video?
I don't know what they've had access to.
I mean, in other words, did law enforcement share that with them to show that the people who were being questioned about this, that their paths didn't cross that day?
Law enforcement shared a lot with the Johnsons, and they usually come back with us a lie. Because if it doesn't agree with what they want to think, it's a lie.
What about...
that's why I've been called a liar.
What about I believe it was the 3rd autopsy that said that there was blunt force trauma, whereas previously the other autopsies had not reflected that?
First autopsy was G.B.R, and it said positional asphyxiation accident. 2 years later, I'm going from memory on these dates now, approximately 2 years later, he was exhumed, and it was a paid-for autopsy by Dr. Anderson out of Florida, who worked with the Orange County coroner's office at one time, I believe. And he came back, there was blunt force trauma, I believe, to the neck. And then I believe they exhumed Kendrick's body after 5 years, approximately 3 years later. He added, I believe, his dentist had some damage to the thorax. And there's a 4th autopsy done by the Department of Defense, which was done from materials from other autopsies that came back identical to what the G.B.R said initially. And then he said he received some additional information, which all I could find, he said that he got a write-up from the EMTs that first saw Kendrick's at the gym. Said there was a small bruise in his neck, so he wrote it up undetermined. But there are some mitigating factors that makes you know about some other events that happened that might have made him change that autopsy.
Are you free to disclose those factors?
He was given some counseling by a person associated with the DOJ, and that person said that spent some time with him, made him feel like a man, and now he's talking the way I want him to. You reason that whatever you want to.
Is it in that information?
That's in that information.
Now,
that's undisputable. My
last question for you is, do you think, with your conclusion and what you've disclosed, after reading all of this, you and the 2 others, that this case is closed?
People use the word closed. Yeah, under the law, to be able to talk to you like I'm talking to you now, it has to be closed. Otherwise, I couldn't tell you some of the things in the evidence, because it was an active case. I can't discuss an active case. But to me, when you use the word closed, you never close a case, any case, in your mind or in your ability to find out more about it. If somebody walks in there, if they're in that lobby waiting on me right now to get through this interview, and they tell me they've got some viable evidence, I'm going to put them in the same chair you, and I'm going to listen to the evidence. And if they give me some evidence that I feel like is viable and truthful, case is open. I'm going to look at it. Without a doubt, you'd be a fool not to if you're an investigator. Just because we come up with a conclusion doesn't mean we're always right. We pretty much we are. But and there's, like I said, there's always doubt in some people's minds. But you know, if you're an investigator, you're inquisitive anyway. So somebody walks in here and says, "I want to tell you something about this." You're going to listen to it if you're a good investigator, and if you're fair, and you care about the people. And they may not think it. I care about the Johnsons. If I didn't care about the Johnsons, I could have avoided all this turmoil. I didn't have to open this case. I did it because I cared, and I wanted to know. I'm inquisitive, and I wanted. I'd heard a lot about it. I wanted to see the files. Mm-hmm. And I've taken a lot of grief over it, especially from the Johnsons. I've been cursed. I've been called names. I've been called a liar, and I'll be continued because they don't agree with what I saw. But they haven't seen that, and I wish they could see it. My next fight is to get all that material released to the media.
I was going to ask.
I would love to close that door and leave you in here and leave you with those boxes and let you go through everything in there.
Any idea of when that might happen?
If I could do that, I'd like to see what your opinion was too.
Oh, well, it will take me a while, I'm sure, because I'm looking at all of this, and I can see why you had to have more than just yourself, go through the boxes. But any timeline or anticipated timeline on?
Well, it's a federal judge, and I want to sit down with him. And the judge, don't take me wrong, he's a very good judge in my opinion. He's been doing it a long time. A very intelligent Judge Hugh Lawson. I think I've had a lot of cases for him. You've seen him too. I mean, he runs a good court, and in my opinion, he's one of the best judges I've ever dealt with. And I want to sit down with him and tell him what my thinking is and why. I love transparency. I mean, I like to lay things out, and that's another way you get another opinion. I mean, somebody might through every one of those myself. That's why it took me 13 months. But still, another opinion doesn't hurt. I'd like to have another 500 opinions. I like news people to be able to just sit down and say, "Give me that box, let me look at it." I don't have a problem with it. I'd like for the Johnsons to be able to look at it. I like for the world to look at it. Doesn't bother me. I mean, if somebody comes back and says, "Hey, you're wrong," I'm wrong. Prove it to me.
Well, with that, thank you so much for sitting down and talking us through this process. And of course, we are waiting to see what happens next. Maybe years down the road, there might be somebody to come and collect that reward that you offered with some legitimate, information, or maybe not. But we thank you so much for your transparency.
You never know. I told you I had a case in '93, a murder case. 25 years later, when I came back, we solved it.
You never know.
He's right over here in this jail. You never know. You don't ever quit. And like I say, no case is ever closed, in my opinion. Now, if somebody walks in here and says, "I want to talk about it," I'll live another 25 years coming in and ask me about this one again.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
The parents of Kendrick Johnson have announced plans to file documentation in federal court in Atlanta. Johnson was 17 years old when his body was discovered in a rolled up gym mat at Lowndes High School. That happened back in 2013.
One thing we kept hearing over and over again was about this missing FBI report regarding the security tape hard drive and the blacked out footage. So we looked into finding that report to see if we could locate it, and we did. However, the report was heavily redacted. But then we were able to find the unredacted FBI report, and what we discovered blew us away. You see, in the redacted report, you can barely see any of the video frames. Most of the frames are blacked out, and the ones with KJ are barely recognizable. In the unredacted report, we were able to see all the video frames in full color. The report follows KJ, Brian, and Brandon's movement throughout the school for the entire day and records where they were. Not only is this further video evidence that the Bell Boys were on campus when KJ went missing, we found something that the FBI clearly didn't want us to see. Let us put them side by side so you can see what we found. Here they are. Can you see something a little odd? Look closely. There appears to be a frame on both pages that matches. How could this be? What tipped us off is KJ's yellow folder. We were going through Brian's movements, and all of a sudden, KJ's folder appeared on screen. That's right. There's a frame on KJ's side and Brian's side that is identical. The boys are standing seemingly right next to each other in the hallway.
Did you see Kendrick that day?
No. I did not.
Seeing the alleged killer of KJ standing next to him in the hallway the day he died in school has sent chills down our spines. How did no one see this frame? How did the FBI let this go? Why did it take 6 years and an independent filmmaker to find this? These are all questions that may never go answered. But what we do know for sure is that we have more facts now than we ever have. And this case needs to be reopened and re-examined with a fine-tooth comb.
Yo, if I had 100 sheep and one of them got away, I would leave the 99 and go find that one. That's right.
The parents of Kendrick Johnson have announced plans to file documentation in federal court in Atlanta. Johnson was 17 years old when his body was discovered in a rolled-up gym mat at Lowndes High School. That happened back in 2013.